This video is sponsored by ioStux.com. After professionally coaching for Overwatch League organizations like the Boston Uprising or New York Excelsior, ioStux is now running the largest private coaching service available for Overwatch. With up to 350 sessions sold each month, he coaches hundreds of clients on a regular basis. His most successful client managed to climb all the way from silver into high top 500 in less than a year after only a few sessions. If you want to improve as quickly and efficiently as possible, check out ioStux.com and use discount code MAJORMIDGET for 30% off your first order. Widow's primary weapon, Chips' Demon, makes Widowmaker fire scoped distance shots, dealing 100 or 300 damage with a fully charged shot to the body or to the head respectively, taking a slither under a second to fully charge. Widow can also switch to an SMG, dealing up to 130 DPS. For reference, Sombra's DPS is 160 and Soldier 76's DPS is 171. Starting off with a tad bit of micro. These are the percentage breakpoints to one-shot a variety of squishy heroes. However, due to factors such as trigger discipline and tracking, it's unlikely that you will min-max your percentage charge, but it's definitely worth mentioning to save a few milliseconds in sniper duels. Moving on to Widow's SMG. It's essentially what Fan the Hammer is to McCree and only primarily used in close quarter combat, as Jayne explains here.
Staying scoped in, yes, it will allow you to get the headshot in those regards, but is the headshot actually required to kill them? No. So it's much more important to actually prioritize your own survivability and enter into evasive movement, basically. AD spam, looking left, right during reloads and whatnot, but just spraying them or whatnot, it will do less damage, assuming that you would have otherwise hit the scoped shot. But since you have teammates' assistance anyway, if you are standing still, it makes it much easier for a McCree to burst you with 170 instantaneous damage by just shooting you in the head and punching you if you're hard scoped in. So that's why in close quarters, it's not that GM and pro Widowmakers can't hit those shots. It's that the risk of them getting shot and bursted through heals, through supports and whatnot is too big of a risk to take. So in close quarters, store your ego and just SMG them to death and then teabag them.
A fundamental concept to Widow's rifle is to maintain longer sightlines. A visual example of this would be on Chunkertown first point defense, where you keep at a range where flanker damage is not meaningful or easily avoided, or where hit scan damage starts to enter in heavy fall-off ranges. To add a bit more nuance to this, you also ideally don't want to be playing in enclosed areas, specifically against flanking heroes that want to play significantly shorter sightlines. For instance, on Havana first defense, even if you go left side with a long sightline, it's very easy for Reaper or McCree to force a duel as the area is relatively tight and confined. Instead, playing the opposite side might make it harder for Reaper to path and for McCree to find a shorter sightline. Building off of this further, you always want to be constantly repositioning yourself and almost never peeking the same angle twice in the same period of time in sniper duels, as Sparlow explains here.
Widowmaker just pops sights somewhere in this general vicinity here. What I would actually do is, instead of playing here, because she can easily shoot you from, here or here or here or here, right? This is no good. What I want you to do is I want you to actually move this way, and you could actually take an angle going this direction. Some positioning over here. The problem with staying here is she can shoot you from a million different spots.
Some key exceptions to mention that would allow you to re-peek would be any advantages gained after your first peek. This could be as simple as Infrasight or as coordinated as a dive, which will occupy their Widowmaker. Speaking about timing your peeks as Widowmaker, here's, coincidentally, ioStux explaining why you don't want to peek too early.
Why do you peek this early?
I think I maybe thought that I could get a pick.
Even if you get a pick, can you just run on the point? You need to wait for your teammates anyways. So there's two reasons why peeking here is bad. First of all, even if you get the pick, no one is there to follow up. Your team is still in spawn. Your diva literally just died. Reason number two, there's no one applying pressure on the enemy team, right? So as I mentioned earlier, you always want to look for advantageous fights. The enemy Widowmaker, right? She can't spend all of her time looking for you. Once your teammates engage, she has to shoot your teammates. If she just keeps searching for you, then she's useless. When your teammates go in, they're going to draw attention of the enemy Widowmaker, and that's when you can peek. Right here, and do you see where the enemy Widowmaker is looking? So this is much better, because now she's distracted. Now she needs to decide what she wants to do. Is she going to deal with you? Is she going to focus your teammates, etc.?
To build off of that further, the same applies if you peek too late, and this is often why you will see Widowmakers catch one or two teammates after the fight has happened, which would have been much more useful during the team fight when tanks can actually follow up. Building off what ioStux briefly mentioned in that clip of wanting to take unfair duels, here he is again presenting and explaining a visual example of a Widow duel with more variables to account for.
You never want to take a fair fight, right? You always want to have an advantage when you go for a 1v1. For example, you get the jump on someone, right? You get the first shot without them noticing you. The advantage could be positional. So for example, if you have high ground, that's a positional advantage. You have your ultimate, that's an advantage. You can have someone pocketing you. That's an advantage, right? There's also peeker's advantage, because obviously you know when you peek, but the enemy doesn't know when you peek, which means that you're going to have an advantage in terms of reaction time. So if we look at this 1v1, there's two outcomes. Either you use your ultimate here and the enemy Widowmaker doesn't hide, in which case you can peek her and kill her because you have a very, very big advantage. You have peeker's advantage, you have high ground advantage, and you have wall hack advantage. Or she doesn't peek you, which means that for the entire duration of your ultimate, the enemy Widowmaker and the enemy Ashe are going to be completely useless.
Since Widow's weapon is heavily intertwined with positional matchups, I'll include more visual examples in the latter sections of my guide. Ending off with a bit of mechanical micro, here's Spyro showcasing some fundamental crosshair placement.
You're putting the crosshair off of where you need it to be. I'm not sure why. Not only is it it's like I can understand that the height maybe, because you're still going to headshot her from this height. Why is it off to the side? Why is it not directly on the corner? I mean, your crosshair placement, it wasn't even a flick there. You just put your crosshair off of the position where it needed to be. You had all the time in the world to line up your shot, and you still missed.
This is even more important on console where you can't flick as easily, hence setting up your crosshair before taking the shot can lift a heavy load off your aiming. In terms of improving your aim, I recommend Triad FFA since it has good generalizability to actual in-game experiences, and on console, aim trainers just aren't a thing. Widow's first ability, Batman's Stolen Grappling Hook, makes Widow launch a grappling hook towards the location she's aiming at from a maximum range of 20 meters away with a cooldown of 12 seconds. A bit of micro to start off with is to ensure your grapple sensitivity is low to prevent you accidentally grappling things that are miles off to where you place your crosshair. If you're uncomfortable on Widow though, I recommend gradually decreasing it over time. There are two primary uses of Widow's grapple, the first being likewise to McCree roll and to use it defensively to escape danger. To build on this further, you ideally want to grapple across parallel high grounds, especially against solo divers. For instance, on Dorado 2nd, you can grapple across to the high ground coast side, and on Anubis 1st, you can replicate the same sort of effect. Keep in mind that this is significantly less effective against a coordinated dive, since a hero like Echo can pursue your escape, but by extending your survival, you can draw out more resources. However, Widow's grapple should also obviously be used to take high ground angles where possible, but the timing of this needs to be when your tanks are baiting attention, as if you grapple to a location too early, not only will your angle be contested, but you may potentially lose your life. A visual example of using grapple too early could be on Havana 1st attack, where you grapple in relation to your tanks that are practically AFK. This will mean your angle could potentially be forced out, and due to your reduced HP, you might die before your tanks even do anything. The last niche use of grapple is for the grapple hook shots. This isn't very practical, but as long as you know where the Widowmaker is, you can often bypass Infrasight, as it's significantly harder hitting a Widowmaker mid-air, giving you the slight advantage. Widow's second ability, completely useless, makes Widow shoot a Venom mine onto nearly any surface, dealing 15 DPS for a total of 75 damage, paired with a 15-second cooldown and a visual indicator of it being triggered or destroyed. Widow can also see through walls on a target for the 5-second duration that the Venom mine has. The predominant use of Venom mine is to use it defensively, almost like an alarm bell, to alert yourself of potential flankers. Building off that fundamental concept, you may also want to tailor your Venom mine based on their flankers. For instance, on Anubis defense first, you might want to Venom mine top right if they're running Genji Echo or heroes with vertical mobility. However, if they're running Tracer Doomfist or heroes with limited vertical mobility, you might want to Venom mine to the adjacent high ground. If it's a mixture of both, for instance Tracer Echo, then you should Venom mine the flank that you are closest to, which would be the right flank in this case, as you have less time to land damage and prevent their engage. You also might not want to use Venom mine, as it can give away your unscouted position, as Spyro explains here.
Why would you not pop your Venom mine here? I've always been a proponent of Venom mine. Use it, don't waste it. It's an ability, it gives you information, it's scouting, there's no reason not to. But there are very specific circumstances when you do not want to, and I think this is one of those very specific circumstances. They know you're close, right? It's the audio cue. When you Venom mine close to the enemy team, this Genji is going to hear this Venom mine, and all that does is gives him opportunity to react. Now what you should do is you should peek this here, take a shot or two, and then Venom mine. And that way, if the Genji does dash on you, it's not as if you've lost the element of surprise, but now you've already given away your position, and so you have nothing to lose, and all you're doing now is you're basically defensively discouraging them from pushing you.
The last and admittedly niche use of Venom mine is to utilize his hitbox to cover your head in Widow duels. The famous spot for doing this is on Hanamura first point defense, where you Venom mine in a gap and proceed to peek, again referring to the concept of taking advantageous duels. Widow's ultimate, wall hacks, makes Widowmaker gain wall hacks for 15 seconds. The predominant use of Infrasight is to gain additional scouting information to allow yourself to force more aggressive duels. In order to pull this off successfully, timing your Infrasight for when you're about to peak is key to gaining more effective use of Infrasight, as I explain here.
Like, let's see if that hasn't happened. Now is when you want the Infrasight. You've already used half of it when you're peaking. What value out of Infrasight did you get from going here to here? Nothing. Zero value. You wasted half your Infrasight. And like right now, this would be a great use of Infrasight. Perhaps, Hands of Six a really hard flank and then goes down main. That extra Infrasight time is going to buy you a lot of information and scouting for where the enemy is going to be pushing. Also when as well, because again, you use it way too early.
A lot of Widowmakers also like using Infrasight to match the opposing Widowmaker, but hot take, saving Infrasight all game to use it in response to their Widow's Infrasight can be wasted value, as ioStux explains here.
Do you see how you charge your ultimate faster than the enemy Widowmaker? So if you ult here, then she can't counter ult. And you can keep charging your ultimate. So by the time she gets her ultimate, your next ultimate is maybe already at 50%. So throughout this game, because you're better than the enemy Widowmaker, you can use like 10 ultimates, but she only gets to use 5 ultimates. And if she's stupid, she's going to peek you while you have your ultimate, and then you can kill her. Which means that she's going to get her ultimate even slower. And now the enemy Widowmaker is ahead of you in ult charge, even though you charged your first ultimate faster, but you just held onto it forever. Like the only time you really consistently match Widowmaker ultimates is if you 100% know that you're evenly matched. So if you're in like a tournament game, and you know that the enemy Widowmaker is good and you respect her, then you can match ultimates, because it's just the safer play. But in solo queue, if you want to climb like against a master level Widowmaker, you can't give her that respect.
A common response to not matching sights would be what to do when they have sights and you don't. Well, there is one primary option, which is to play angles that avoid the Widowmaker completely. A visual example of this could be on Havana first point defense, where you simply play in a position where their Widowmaker does not have LOS onto you. If possible, you should constantly be asking your teammates to where their Widowmaker is, so she doesn't get the jump on you. Note that you also have a long sight line, cover, and a route of retreat as well. Onto the compositional, communicational, and positional part of the guide. In terms of general positioning, there are 4 key principles which I'll showcase on Hanamura's second attack. The first is to have cover, pretty obvious. The second is to have line of sight, which is again pretty obvious. The third is to have good distance from angles so that the enemy flankers don't sneak up on you. And the fourth and final guideline is to have aggressive and defensive rotations to exert more pressure on the enemy team or to just escape. With positioning in Brawl, where there often isn't much mobility or range, taking slightly more aggressive splits timed well during the teamfight is key. For example, on Lijiang Control Center, a very brawl-based map, you could path co-side and set up a great angle whilst your tanks pay attention. Note that the 4 guidelines also apply here. In Dive, likewise to McCree, you don't want to stack onto your backline, but you also don't want to play split, as Spalo explains here.
You don't want to position on top of the team because it allows the enemy team to be able to dive you without taking damage, because there's only one LOS where you're actually putting damage. Like we could draw a straight line of where this damage is coming from, and it's here. They can hide from this damage in here, they can hide from the damage here, they can hide from the damage here, they can hide from the damage here. Whereas if you position just slightly here, not too much, where you can still be Harmony Orbed, Armor Packed, you can poke this pre-jump, this pre-jump, this pre-jump, this no longer has cover, this no longer has cover, this has significantly less cover, this has significantly less cover, and you can even peek down this hallway a little bit easier. Dive wants to corral you. Stacking against Dive is not the answer. It is being in positions where you can peel for each other, but you can poke out Dive before the fight happens. So you don't want to be isolated, but you don't want to be stacked.
In terms of setting up your own dives, you want to make sure you have longer sightlines on where your team is diving, i.e. the kill box, an angle on said kill box, and LOS to your backline. For instance, on Anuba's second point defense, you have a sightline, angle, and line of sight respectively on the kill box. You can also be calling out potential dive targets if you soften them up with a body shot, as Jayne explains here.
Widowmaker actually requires a surprising amount of comms, especially when you're playing with dive, so that people can follow up on your directs, much in the same way that if you direct somebody on Pharah, that alone can trigger a dive. If the tank used too many resources or managed to land a direct on a squishy, the Pharah would call a dive and we'd just collapse on them. So that was like one of our primary strategies. Now this was seasons and seasons ago. This current strat doesn't work as well. But yeah, with Pharah and Widowmaker, having the ability to like have a team or something that can follow up on directs very quickly is an extremely powerful tool.
In poke, longer sightlines and harder, more aggressive angles are the 2 keys to beating a double shield composition. With the former, on Blizzard World first attack, you could grapple to the right side high ground whilst the front line is baiting attention, providing you with an angle and a decently ranged sightline onto the Ashe. Since double shield doesn't have much mobility, you can also be looking for harder flanks. Referring back to the Hanamura second point example and a 90-degree off angle, hence you aren't just shooting shields. However, in double shield variations that play a tracer who can mark your flank, you should be timing your splits late if you are keen on going for these aggressive plays. Well, that's it for the guide. If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.